Everything society told you about getting rich is a lie.
A complete lie.
Right. I realize that sounds pretty dramatic right out of the gate, but just, think about the script you've been handed since childhood.
Oh, it's a standard playbook.
Yeah, exactly. Go to school, get a safe job, save 10% of your income, put it in some index fund, and maybe, skip that daily $5 coffee so you can eventually retire comfortably at 65.
Which is basically just a formula for basic survival.
Exactly. We are told this is the golden ticket, but today we're tearing that entire script apart. So welcome to today's deep dive. We've pulled together this really fascinating stack of sources for you. We're looking at a highly provocative wealth-building manifesto, and we've cross-referenced it with hard economic data on modern leverage.
And we also layered in some behavioral psychology research too, right? On how human beings actually process risk.
Yes, exactly. Our mission today is to essentially deconstruct the exact psychological shifts, the hidden economic levers, and the specific risk profiles that separate the 0.001% from basically the rest of the world.
And I think we should probably set expectations immediately here.
Yeah, definitely.
If you're tuning in right now for tips on how to, optimize your savings account yield or maybe negotiate a 5% raise at the office, you are in the wrong place.
Totally the wrong place.
The sources we're synthesizing today argue that the traditional advice is, well, it's just not the formula for building an empire or generating generational wealth. We're talking about a radical rewiring of how you view money, value, and honestly, your own time.
Yeah.
The fundamental argument here is that a millionaire might be made by cautious saving, but a billionaire is made by relentless building.
I love that. So we are going to explore this whole builder versus consumer philosophy. But before we get into the mechanics of how to actually build an asset, we have to talk about the trap.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the manifesto points out a really harsh reality about how the global economy functions.
It's pretty brutal.
It is. It basically argues that 99% of the population is trapped on the wrong side of this invisible line. They are purely consumers.
Wow.
Those people look at the economy almost like a buffet where they are just trying to afford the next plate.
Right. And what's fascinating here is how incredibly pervasive that state of being is. It's just the default state of humanity. Most people wake up and they consume content, they consume products, they consume software. They just consume their own time.
Yeah. Doom scrolling for hours.
Exactly. Every time you open an app on your phone, someone else is getting paid. Every time you purchase a convenience item, someone else gets paid. You are just constantly transferring your limited resources to the architects of those systems. And the traditional way we're taught to look at the economy is kind of like pushing a boulder up a hill. We go to work, we push the boulder a few feet, and we get a paycheck for our physical exertion.
Yep.
And then we use that paycheck to buy a slightly better pair of shoes for the next day of pushing the boulder. Our entire financial strategy is really just hoping we don't get too tired before we reach 65.
Which is terrifying when you really think about it.
It is. But the people at the absolute top, those 0.0001%ers, they aren't pushing boulders at all. They are building the treadmills and the levers and the conveyor belts that move the boulders for them.
And that distinction requires a massive psychological shift. The behavioral psychology notes we reviewed, they highlight that the first step to massive wealth isn't actually working harder at your current job. It's a mental crossing. You have to permanently transition your identity from the side of the equation that pays to the side that gets paid, from being the audience to being the architect. The wealthiest people simply do not interact with reality primarily as consumers. Their default mode of existing in the world is production.
Okay, wait. I need to challenge this a bit.
Sure, go for it.
Because I think a lot of people listening to this are highly educated, incredibly driven professionals. If I'm, say, a top-tier corporate lawyer billing $2,000 an hour,
Okay.
or a specialized neurosurgeon pulling in $3 or $4 million a year, I am definitely getting paid. I am wealthy by almost any societal standard. Why does this manifesto completely dismiss that path? Isn't that high-paying job the ultimate goal for most people?
It's a great question, and it's the exact illusion the manifesto tries to shatter. Look, if you're a neurosurgeon making $4 million a year, you obviously have a fantastic income.
Yeah, no one is complaining about $4 million a year.
Right, but you are still fundamentally trading your time for money. You still have an absolute ceiling dictated by the laws of physics. You only have 24 hours in a day. If your hands start shaking or, I don't know, you want to take a 6-month vacation, your income drops to zero immediately.
Because I still have to physically show up to push the boulder.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Let's look at the brutal math the source material lays out regarding this whole trading time for money thing.
Yeah, this part blew my mind.
It's crazy. Imagine you somehow land a job paying $10,000 an hour.
Which is just unfathomable.
Right, an unfathomable hourly wage. But even at $10,000 an hour, to make $1 billion, you would have to work 24 hours a day with 0 sleep, 0 weekends, and 0 breaks for 11 solid years.
Wow. 11 years without sleeping once.
Exactly. Human biology makes that physically impossible. Therefore, it is a mathematical certainty that you literally cannot trade your time for $1 billion.
So the ceiling isn't a lack of talent, and it's not a lack of work ethic. The ceiling is literally the physical limitation of time.
Yes. And because you can't work your way there by the hour, you have to fundamentally redefine what money actually is.
Right, because we carry so much emotional baggage around money, guilt, status, identity, all of that.
Exactly. And the text strips all of that away with this really brilliant definition. It says money is simply a receipt for value delivered.
Yeah.
It's completely objective. If you want more receipts, you basically just have to deliver more value.
I feel like that reframes the entire problem. It moves the focus away from how can I get more money to how can I solve a massive problem.
Yes, exactly.
And the text uses Elon Musk to illustrate the scale of this, which I thought was perfect. Musk didn't become the wealthiest person on earth by opening like a string of highly successful local car dealerships.
Right, a dealership just solves a relatively small friction.
Yeah, getting a car for a small localized group of people. Instead, Musk targeted massive global friction, the survival of humanity via sustainable energy, and the multi-planetary bottleneck.
It all comes down to the math of value, which is incredibly straightforward when you strip away the emotion.
Break that math down for us.
Sure. So, if you solve a $10 problem for 1,000 people, you generate $10,000. That's a solid side business.
Nothing wrong with that.
Right. But if you solve a $100 problem for 1 billion people, you generate $100 billion. The mandate for you as the listener is to stop agonizing over your hourly rate and start searching for massive friction in the world that you can remove.
But there's a glaring logistical hole in this logic.
Okay, what is it?
If we've already established that a single human being only has 24 hours in a day, how on earth do you solve a problem for 1 billion people simultaneously? Like, a neurosurgeon can only operate on one brain at a time. How do you scale your value when you are just one person?
Well, you need a lever.
So what does this all mean? How do we actually do that?
The text quotes the Greek mathematician Archimedes here. Give me a lever long enough and I shall move the world. If you want to touch 1 billion lives without working 1 billion hours, you have to utilize the structural levers of the economy. And the research outlines 4 specific pillars of leverage, which are neatly divided between the old economy and the modern economy.
Let's break those down, because I feel like this is where the mechanics of wealth creation really get exposed.
Definitely. So the first 2 levers are labor and capital. This is how the old guard of billionaires, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the huge industrial titans, this is how they built their wealth.
Right.
They used human labor, meaning they hired tens of thousands of people to work in their factories and essentially push the boulder for them. And they used capital, meaning they utilized massive amounts of borrowed money to buy raw materials, build railways, construct steel mills, things like that.
Which is incredibly prohibitive for the average person today. I mean, if you have an idea for a business right now, you don't magically have $50 million in capital to build a factory.
No, of course not.
And you certainly don't have the payroll to hire 1,000 engineers. The friction to access those old levers is massive. You usually need someone's permission, like a venture capitalist or a bank, just to get them.
And that brings us to the monumental shift in the modern economy. The new guard of billionaires, the ones building massive empires right now from their laptops and coffee shops, they largely bypass labor and capital in the beginning.
Wow, okay.
Instead, they rely on the 3rd and 4th levers, which are code and media.
Code and media. This is really the core of the manifesto. Why are these 2 levers so structurally different from labor and capital?
Because of a concept called zero marginal cost of reproduction.
Zero marginal cost. Okay, explain that.
Let's look at the mechanics. If you own a traditional business that makes physical widgets, and you want to sell 10 times as many widgets, you need 10 times as much raw material, 10 times as much warehouse space, 10 times as many workers.
Right. Your costs scale linearly with your production. It's heavy, it's slow, and it's expensive.
But with code and media, the physics change entirely. If you spend 3 months writing a piece of software or building an application, you exert all of your effort up front. You build it once. But to distribute that software to one person or to 1 million people or to 1 billion people simultaneously, it costs you practically nothing.
Just server space, really.
Exactly. The cost of replicating that code is essentially a fraction of a cent in server space. And the same physics apply to media. You write a book, record a video, or publish a digital framework once. It exists out in the world, infinitely reproducible, working to recruit customers or deliver value while you are fast asleep.
That phrase right there, while you are fast asleep, that's the ultimate litmus test. The source text makes a brutal distinction here that I really think will resonate with a lot of high earners.
Oh, the job versus business thing.
Yes. It states that if your business requires you to physically wake up and perform an action for the business to make money, you do not actually own a business. You own a job.
It's a painful realization for a lot of entrepreneurs.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, a highly paid freelance consultant who makes $1 million a year might think they own a business. But if they take a month off to travel, their income completely stops. They own a job. The entire purpose of leveraging code and media is to structurally decouple your input of time from your output of value. You build the system once, and the system delivers the value infinitely.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic again here.
Go ahead.
Because on paper, this sounds almost utopian. We have an economy where the tools of leverage, code, and media are practically free. Anyone with a smartphone or a laptop can write code, spin up an app, or start a media channel.
True.
So here's where it gets really interesting. If the leverage is completely democratized and the barriers to entry are practically zero, why isn't everyone wealthy? Why is 99% of the population still pushing the boulder?
It really comes down to how human beings are biologically wired to process risk. This is where the behavioral psychology research we looked at intersects with the Wealth Manifesto. Humans suffer from extreme loss aversion. Evolutionarily, we are wired to avoid risk because for our ancestors, a risk usually meant physical ruin, like getting eaten by a predator or starving. And our brains still interpret professional or financial failure as a literal physical threat.
So we treat starting a side project that might fail with the same biological panic as facing down a tiger.
Exactly. And the text categorizes society into 3 distinct tiers based on how they handle this modern risk. The middle class, broadly speaking, lets that evolutionary fear dictate their lives.
Right.
They avoid risk entirely. They optimize for safety, taking the safe job, and saving their 10%. This strategy prevents ruin, sure, but mathematically guarantees they will never build massive wealth.
Then you have the second tier, which is the complete opposite extreme. The gamblers.
Yes, the people who take ruinous risks, these are the individuals betting their life savings on a volatile crypto coin or, taking out a second mortgage on their family home to fund a poorly planned restaurant.
Yeah, we've all seen that happen.
They expose themselves to catastrophic downside. If they fail, they're completely wiped out. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the people building empires, the architects utilizing code and media, they aren't gambling. They take what the text calls asymmetric risks.
Break down the mechanics of an asymmetric risk, because this really seems to be the secret to the entire philosophy.
An asymmetric risk is a scenario where the potential downside and the potential upside are completely out of proportion. The downside is strictly mathematically capped, but the upside is functionally infinite.
Give us a real-world example of that.
Let's say you decide to spend your weekends for the next 6 months building a digital product, maybe a specialized plugin for e-commerce stores or a complex scheduling software for a niche industry.
So you are utilizing the lever of code.
Right. Now let's say you launch it and it completely fails. 0 users. What is your actual tangible downside?
Well, you didn't borrow $1 million to build a factory. Your downside is just the opportunity cost of your time. You lost some weekend hours. Maybe you lost some time you would have otherwise spent watching Netflix or, I don't know, playing video games.
Exactly. Your survival isn't threatened. You aren't bankrupt. You still have your day job. The downside is strictly capped at lost free time.
But the upside.
Because you use the infinite leverage of code and the internet, if that plugin solves a real problem, it can scale globally almost instantly. It could generate millions of dollars in revenue while costing you practically nothing in overhead. That is an asymmetric bet. The wealthy take hundreds of these small, capped downside bets, knowing that it only takes one massive asymmetric upside to create an empire.
And this ties directly into what the manifesto calls the ultimate unbreakable law of wealth creation. You will never, ever get rich renting out your time. You must own equity. You have to own the asset.
Because when you own the asset, whether it's the code you wrote, the media you created, or the business you founded, your wealth is no longer tied to a salary dictated by an employer. Your wealth becomes tied to the valuation of the entity itself.
The text uses Jeff Bezos to illustrate this brilliantly. People look at Jeff Bezos and think he's wealthy because Amazon paid him an astronomical salary.
Which isn't true at all.
No. For decades, his actual cash salary was relatively modest compared to other Fortune 500 CEOs. He didn't become one of the richest men on earth by saving his paycheck. He became wealthy because he retained majority equity in Amazon when it transitioned from a tiny project in a garage to a global logistical monopoly. He owned the asset. As the value of the asset exploded, his wealth exploded proportionally.
Build the asset.
Yeah.
Own the asset. Scale the asset. That is the mechanical formula.
Simple as that.
Well, we need to pivot here because up to this point, we've been discussing the theoretical architecture. We've covered the math of value, the mechanical superiority of code and media, and the psychological framework of asymmetric risk.
Right.
It all sounds incredibly elegant on paper. But the source material is very careful not to present this as a motivational fairy tale.
Yeah, there is absolutely no get-rich-quick promise here. In fact, the manifesto uses the word brutal to describe the actual execution of this philosophy. This requires a level of sacrifice and resilience that is profoundly uncomfortable.
It goes back to the behavioral psychology we discussed earlier. To execute on this, you have to constantly fight your own evolutionary programming. You have to willingly endure public failure, which most people find terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
You have to dedicate hours of intense cognitive labor to a project that might yield absolutely zero immediate reward.
You're sitting alone at a desk, staring at a screen, wrestling with code or writing content, while your peers are out at parties, taking vacations, and basically enjoying the immediate dopamine hit of consuming. You are delaying gratification for years, building your lever block by block in the hopes that it eventually moves the world.
The author describes this specific type of drive as the builder's sickness. It's an inability to be satisfied with the status quo of just surviving the economic conveyor belt. It's a relentless, almost pathological obsession with solving friction and building systems. This raises an important question, really. Do you have that sickness?
And that is the true bottleneck, isn't it? The tools to build empires have never been cheaper. 50 years ago, you needed immense capital and permission to reach 1 billion people.
Oh, absolutely.
Today, the internet, artificial intelligence, code, they've all obliterated those barriers. You have a supercomputer in your pocket right now that can distribute your value globally.
Which means the only thing standing between you and the creation of an asset is your own resourcefulness and your willingness to execute. The market no longer cares about your background. It only cares about the value you can deliver and the leverage you can apply to that value.
So what does this mean for you, listening right now? The core imperative of this deep dive is to recognize the choice you make every single day. Stop waiting for someone to give you permission to produce. No one is going to tap you on the shoulder and offer you an empire.
Mm-hmm.
You have to actively decide to stop merely surviving, stop pushing the boulder for someone else, and start building the treadmill.
It requires a continuous daily rewiring of your habits. Every time you open your laptop, you face a binary choice. Are you about to consume someone else's value and hand them a receipt? Or are you going to put in the uncomfortable work of producing value and generating your own?
Build the asset, own the asset, scale the asset. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. Something that builds on everything we've discussed today but looks toward the future. We've established that crossing the invisible line from consumer to producer is the ultimate individual goal.
Right.
And we are entering an era where AI can write code for you, and media production is essentially free.
The levers are becoming universally accessible to literally everyone.
Exactly. So think about the macroeconomic implications of that. What happens to the global economy if everyone actually develops the builder's sickness? If the tools are so democratized that everyone manages to cross that invisible line, and everyone is fiercely protecting their time, building assets, and utilizing infinite leverage, well, who is left to consume?
That's a wild thought.
Right. If everyone is an architect who is left to pay the receipts for the value delivered, keep an eye out for that friction.